Yeah. But yeah, that would have been a good suggestion. All right. So YWCA Mission Moves, and we're proud to be a part of the Ohio Climate Justice Fund. Listen, lead, share community listening sessions. Ohio Climate Justice Fund is guided by an advisory board comprised of Ohio environmental advocates and leaders that invest in Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations in Ohio, working at the intersection of racial justice and climate action. OCJF operates in connection with the Jemez principles. Those principles are being exclusive, placing an emphasis on bottom-up organizing, letting people speak for themselves, working together in solidarity and mutuality, building just relationships among ourselves, and being committed to self-transformation. Today is our Listen, Lead, Share, and it is conducted. It is that community conversation. It is that place where we all can express our voice, express our thoughts. And Listen, Lead, Share is a statewide grassroots campaign that includes a goal of hosting public conversations with community members and stakeholders about the best and most effective ways to address climate and environmental justice in their communities. So why does climate matter? Climate change is a change in the unusual weather found in a place. This also includes a change in Earth's climate and unusual temperature. Climate can take much time and many years to change. Climate change is not the great equalizer. As climate change gets worse, temperatures will rise to the most poorer countries like Asia, Latin America, and sub-Saharan Africa, despite the fact that North America and Europe are some of the biggest polluters. In the United States, climate change leads to more extreme weather and disasters, such as increasingly dangerous hurricanes like Katrina and Harvey, devastating wildfires, and even the extreme cold weather events of 2021. Poor, majority BIPOC communities have less infrastructure in place to protect against these events and bear more of the burden. Pollution, much like wealth, is not distributed equally in the United States. Today, Black people are nearly 4 times more likely to die from exposure to pollution than white people. Systemic racism has long influenced where major sources of pollution are located within communities. In the early 20th century, white government planners in many municipalities drew red line maps that identified Black and Latino neighborhoods as undesirable and unworthy of housing loans. Heavy industry was permitted to cluster in those places, adding a toxic dimension that still persists today. Today's focus, keep that energy, influencing energy policy and decisions. So welcome, thank you so much. Now that you can know about the why and the how this conversation is hosted, I want to introduce you to the who is moderating this conversation. Charmaine Webster is an ordained minister and preacher, teacher, and founder of Womanish Projects, a faith-based women's rights 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on Black women and girls. She is known for her out-of-the-box thinking, engaging speaking style, and love for God and people. She is the visionary behind Day Without Women in Church, which Womanish Projects will host this summer on July 31st at the Levitt Pavilion in Dayton, Ohio. In addition to her ministerial work, Reverend Charmaine is a multi-talented entrepreneur. She is the CEO of Tinka's Treats, a home bakery specializing in sweet potato pies. She's a wedding officiant, a premarital counselor, and consultant focused on family and community engagement, racial justice, and grant writing. Charmaine's clients describe her work as transformational and life-changing, and we benefit from Charmaine's transformational work through our advocacy committee here at YWCA. Reverend Charmaine received her bachelor's in arts in public policy from Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, and her master's of divinity from the Chandler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Without further ado, I turn the floor over to you, Charmaine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, YWCA, for inviting me, and Donna for that great introduction. I am so excited to be here for our third and final community conversation around climate justice. We have some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful panelists today. I mean, it's been juicy all week, and so I know that we're going to close it out with some powerful ladies. So first, our first panelist is Meg Maloney. She is the sustainability specialist for the city of Dayton, where she works to advance renewable energy and equity. In the past year, Meg coordinated the restart of the electric aggregation program for all City of Dayton residents and small businesses. Uh-oh, I need to know about this. This program is providing 100% renewable energy to all residents and helping save $350 in 2022. Okay, now, y'all heard that, small business and residents. I'm both of those. I'm about to get that money. Next, we have Alex Penrod. She is the Director of Government Affairs at LMK Advocacy, which provides services to YWCA. She has many years of experience in state government affairs, fundraising, grassroots and grass tops organizing, okay, and nonprofit management. She is a graduate of the Leadership Upper Arlington and has been a featured panelist for Ready to Run, which assists women in preparing to run for office. All right, well, without further ado, we are about to start this conversation about keep that energy, all about influencing policy decisions. So ladies, I know that you all have these wonderful bios, but is there something about yourself or your work that you would like the people to know that we did not share thus far?
Alex, you want to go first?
You go right ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I think the biggest thing I like to add in about the work that I do is it's very resident focused. So what drives my day-to-day actions in my job is all based on the needs of our residents. So I think I have a very good, transparent relationship with a lot of neighborhoods and neighborhood presidents. And I think that helps me center me in what's important in the work that I'm doing. And also I think is good for the city of Dayton to show that we are trying to now prioritize the community needs because we haven't always historically done that in the past. So.
Yep. So as Charmaine mentioned, I represent the YWCA at the state and local and national level, really, to kind of help get things that are important to them before our policymakers. So while I am not an energy expert in any way, I do have a lot of experience in how to get things done and how to kind of use those resources and relationships to achieve goals. So happy to be here and talk to everyone today.
Thank you both so much. So let's get right in there. We know that policy is always the hardest thing for people to understand or figure out how to get involved. So what is it that you all would like people to know about policy and, you know, that they may not know?
Yeah, so I think it seems scary is the thing that I always tell people. It's something that you, until you've done it, you know, it's a hard process to navigate. You may not know where to start. So I think that organizations like the YWCA can be a great place to kind of find like-minded people who care about the same things that you do. And typically they kind of have a structure that is already in place to do those sorts of things. So I think you're already off to a great start being here for this webinar. It shows that you're engaged and that you care and that you're maybe trying to take that first step into getting involved.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that I think a lot of the policies that we've had historically in the past are built for a certain type of people to benefit from, and a majority of people to not have the resources that they need. And so, for instance, the conversation of energy today, I'm extremely passionate about. I'm a biologist by training, but have gotten into the energy field because I think it's intentionally complicated, because we have some people that know how to play the game almost, so that they are the ones that benefit. And so what I think is extremely powerful and important is that the more people that learn how to navigate these systems, the more people are going to benefit from it, and the more that those, I guess, benefits are then going to spread out within our community. And so policy, we're lucky, I think, in Ohio that we have so many people that are advocating about policies across, a variety of issues, and that we have, I guess I should say, specialists or people that know a certain niche really well and that are advocating on behalf of people, because nobody has time to learn about how our energy grid works or like the benefits that are coming into it. So earlier when you were like, oh, my business and I'm benefiting from this, like, I got you, because we are in an intentional system that's complicated, and it's my job to look out for residents and to advocate on their behalf within the energy systems. And so that's what I think about policy is important. The more people that learn, I think it helps, because within the city of Dayton, at least, a lot of our residents are like, energy is really confusing, which led to like the hiring of me being at the city to be like, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to advocate for you all. So I think that is, an important thing about policy is that, it's intentionally complicated, I think, but we have some really amazing people throughout the state, including the YWCA and the Ohio Climate Justice Fund, who are putting an emphasis on us to try and figure out what's going on in the world.
So Meg, you mentioned that it was complicated, and I'm wondering, how does policy work as far as environmental justice goes? Like, how does it compare to different forms of EJ work, whether it be grassroots or, like, how does it compare to the rest of the work that we have talked about this week?
Yeah, so it's like, I think that it's important to realize that like everyone has their purpose. And what I love about the sustainability field, and this applies to energy too, is every person's skill set is important and needed to advance more sustainable goals at the end of the day, right? And so like grassroots movement is just one side of that. They advocate, they can call their representatives, do whatever, but it's at the end of the day, it's like policy makers who are in the room making the decisions, either writing the laws, writing the rates, writing the tariffs that are going to impact people. And so I think, like I said, everyone's important to the equation, because we have grassroots organizations who advocate for things maybe at the legislation level. And those legislators are like, okay, yes, we want to prioritize this. But then it's up to people in the policy decision making, whether it's at local government, whether it's at utilities, or whether it's at the state house, to then work into those needs. So I think it can be complex, because in the energy field, there are people like utilities that need to make money, but then we as residents need to have access to those services like electricity or gas. But we also need it at a fair rate, because there's a lot of people, especially with the pandemic and inflation, that are struggling. So I think, and why it differs kind of in the environmental justice kind of framework, I think that like, when you're, drinking a glass of water or eating food or something, you almost have this more tangible interaction with it. And I think energy is a very interesting thing, because you just turn on your lights, but not a lot of people think about where that energy is coming from. But then there are people within the communities, like, coal mining communities, that are actually seeing how, that electricity is generated and then feeling the impacts of that. So while not all of us are always feeling the impacts of energy generation or where the energy is coming from, there are people, especially low income people, people of color, that are suffering. And so I think that energy differs, I think, uniquely, because we don't always see kind of what's going on unless you're living in those communities that are kind of where the generation is happening.
You want to add something to that?
No, I think that kind of to Meg's point, that environmental justice and energy policy is particularly complicated. It's not something that most people understand unless they've spent years working in it and kind of learning about it. So I kind of echo everything that she said so far about it being extra difficult, in addition to a system that I think is already cumbersome and confusing for people. So I completely agree.
Okay, so how do you think that we could make this work more relevant to our community?
So I think that, it impacts us on a day-to-day basis, right? It's the health of all of our residents. It's the quality of life. It's, we all turn lights on and off. We all benefit from clean water, clean air. So I think it's already relevant. It's just bringing it to a level where people feel involved in it and where people feel like they can make a difference. And I think that that's kind of the benefit of, to our point earlier, having people to help you navigate how to get involved and what to do and what to research and what to learn about. And that's my best advice to everyone.
I would say, I feel like the answer everyone says, like, get educated. But if you're a single mom who has a bunch of, kids that you're trying to take care of and feed, and you're working multiple jobs, it's hard to get educated in these issues. And so I think there's like a balance that needs to be struck of like the city, local entities, nonprofits, like these people that are kind of thinking about this all the time, being connected with the community. So then when that person in that position, so for me at the city, like I said, I feel like a pretty neighborhood focused person. I know people in my community well. I have good relationships with them. I live in the city of Dayton too. So the policies that we put in place impacted me as well. And so I know these families that are struggling, and when I understand their needs a little bit better, they might not have time to come to every community meeting or to go down to the state house to advocate for something, or have the time to spend reading an article to be educated on how our electric aggregation program works. But when I know their needs in kind of a deeper way, and these families and how it impacts them, I think it helps me in my job, because then I'm advocating for them as well. I think if people have the time, there are resources where people can become educated. Like the city of Dayton, we have resources on our website about our sustainability program. I know Power Clean Future Ohio, who is in partnership with the Ohio Climate Justice Fund, they do a lot of education work and advocacy work as well. So if you have the time and capacity, I think there are people like me, like a lot of people will ask me, like, how can I get more plugged in? And I'm happy to provide those resources. But it's also important that we hire and elect people that are engaged in these issues and know their community so they can advocate well on their behalf.
And that was one thing I was gonna, I was gonna kind of jump into next, Meg, is, if there are issues that are really important to you, then that's why elections matter. I talked in a Mission Moves last summer about how important voting is, and, how it is particularly cumbersome at times for women, because not a lot of people on the ballot are women. So it's, you're not seeing people who look like you and who think like you and who have the same kind of motivations. And it's all the more important. It makes it all the more important why we need to pay attention to who we're voting for and make sure that we're voting for people who have similar values and whose priorities are similar.
I think that's such a great point. And Meg, I loved how you put the onus on the staff, the onus on the folks that's in charge. Sometimes folks don't get how important community engagement is, but you are saying it's our responsibility to connect with the people so that they aren't missing the message. So I really appreciate that insight. And of course, then we make our voice be heard by voting. I love that. We are so grateful now that our third panelist has joined us, Dion Mensa. I'm going to give a short bio and then we'll just keep going from there. So Dion, they is the OEC Energy Justice Fellow, champion issues on environmental, climate, and energy justice. They graduated with honors from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and in 2020 with a BA in political science, a BA in social justice studies, and a minor in Spanish. During their time in school, they worked 3 years as an intern for Miami Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion and conducted research on topics related to climate refugeeism and Latin American politics. They have formerly interned with the United Way of Greater Dayton, the Scotia, I think that's how we say it, the Scotia Foundation, Peace and Justice Studies Association, and most recently, Equity Forward. Dion is also currently a community organizer working on grassroots campaigns to resist state violence and work towards liberation of Black, queer, trans, and intersex people from all walks of life through direct action, education, and creating spaces to uplift Black LGBTQIA+ voices. In their free time, they enjoy reading, baking, and spending time with their cat, Nina. Thank you so much, Dion, for joining us. And we were just getting into how can we make this work of climate justice and energy policy more sustainable? So could you jump in and tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Charmaine, and thank you all for having me. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I was listening in to all this amazing stuff, so I'm happy to jump in. I think in terms of making it more relevant in our community, kind of like Meg was saying, like we have to break down these concepts that just seem so incomprehensible, honestly, and like big and greater than us, and really bring it back down to the individual and help them understand their stake in things. So for instance, you know, someone might not understand the full complexities of like climate change or like the need for grid modernization or the need for shifting to renewables, but they can understand that like their energy bills are higher than ever. And, you know, here in Columbus, we're dealing with really intense blackouts and no power. So people can understand like those day-to-day impacts. But I think oftentimes folks who get deep into this work can overlook and underestimate really like the ways that we can teach and learn alongside our communities. And so helping them understand things such as like utility burden, like how much money someone spends on their household income, and really breaking it down and connecting it to their daily lives and helping folks understand it's greater than them is really, I think, how we make climate change relevant in our community. I come to this work from a political background, from an organizing background. So I'm really into the human aspect of all of this and making sure that folks understand the ways that they may be disproportionately impacted, or the ways that these bigger governmental systems that we can get involved in make these decisions that impact us all. So I'll start there.
Great, wonderful. And I think that's real. If we can make it a part of their story, we kind of touched on that on Wednesday about the narrative that's being shared. If it's a part of our story, if we recognize how it touches our daily life, then we will get more involved, because people don't like high bills, right? Especially with gas going up. I mean, perfect example of climate and energy and big business, all of that is showing up when we go to the pump and having to make different choices about if we're going to go to this party or if we're going to do this or buy groceries. All that kind of stuff affects our daily life. So thank you so much. So, you know, we've talked about how this is a lot of work, but how can we make it more sustainable?
That's a good question. So you mean like, how do we make the work or like keep advancing energy to be more sustainable?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say, you can see it in two ways, because it's like, how do I make energy more sustainable with renewables, or how to keep that? I think how to keep the momentum going is, it depends on which state you're in. So in Ohio, if you are passionate about renewable energy and energy equity and energy justice, it can be challenging, right? Because some of the policies that are put in place, we just had one of the most corrupt House bills or energy bills within the state of Ohio, House Bill 6, that is under FBI investigation. There was money that was dark money that was laundered and all of this stuff. For those not familiar with House Bill 6, it was essentially a corporation wanted to get bailed out their coal and nuclear plants, and so they bribed the Speaker of the House in Ohio in order to get that through. But we, as energy advocates, lost a lot of great benefits like energy efficiency. We had a small amount that utilities would offer businesses and households to do energy efficiency work that got repealed through that House bill. So obviously corporations were winning in that, and a lot of residents were suffering. And so it can feel exhausting, but I think what's important is, one, you talked about community. So getting together, there are so many people. I'm glad Dion is on here from the OEC. The OEC is amazing and is so great at connecting people together to continue to push really amazing energy policies within the state. I think that's very important. The second thing to realize too is I like in the energy field, like I said, if you learn how to play the game, you get better at the game, right? And so like there's a lot of creativity that I've really appreciated in people. And I think the creativity has reinvigorated a lot of people that are like, I don't know what to do. I'm exhausted. I feel like we're not going to get anything done. But we have some really creative people coming into this space. I think it's always important to make space for everyone. Like I said, everyone brings new skill sets and can add to the conversation. And so there's a lot of new creative people in the scene in Ohio who are thinking about how to get decision making kind of back into the hands of residents, right? And so that's how I would say that the movement is sustained. Is just through finding those people, because at least for me, those people are extremely motivating, and we can have large wins. Like again, we're saving over $10 million within the city of Dayton footprint through this aggregation program. And we're also 100% renewable. And so like, that's a very invigorating thing. And it makes people feel excited about kind of the work that's happening too.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that, sometimes a federal government structure, a state government structure can feel like you're up against a lot of barriers and can be kind of a hard place to start. So I think it's always motivating to keep work going when you have small victories. So maybe that is starting, kind of at the local level in the city of Dayton or in your suburb or in your kind of backyard, starting small and letting those victories build upon each other so that then it starts to feel a little less big and a little less like you're running into brick walls. And if it's particularly if it's people who agree more with you on these issues than maybe the state legislature does, you can also get a lot more done. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. So I think it's kind of focusing your attention on where you can have the most impact.
Yeah, absolutely echoing with what Alex said. I really believe like local level and energy policy work is like the future. We're doing so much at the local level. Meg shouted out Power Clean Future Ohio, which connects with cities and municipalities across Ohio to offer technical support. And so I really think like as we understand like our reach that we have as individuals, it can feel so small in this greater energy landscape, especially here in Ohio. But really like interacting and engage in being able to make that change where you can like reach people is huge. And then I will also add to Meg's point about just like being creative. I think that that's like huge, like that innovation and like thinking outside of the box, thinking about things that have never been done before and like just trying out new things is like really pivotal to ensuring that this work is sustainable. Meg and I just came from the Midwest Sustainability Summit yesterday, and we got to hear a lot of different folks from across the region really like plotting out all these different ideas around environmental and climate justice. And as these problems continue to become more complex and impact our communities more intimately, it's really important that we just keep thinking of new solutions and who have we welcomed before, who can we bring to the table, and just thinking of new ways like outside of the box. I'm really into that. And I think too, in like thinking about the people that we can reach, like making sure the movements are intergenerational and we're learning from one another in that way. And then a quote that I really like that keeps me going because this work is really heavy. And I think I love that you acknowledge that, Meg, because like to do this, especially in a place like Ohio, is not easy. But anywhere really, but really here in Ohio though. And so one, I think just giving ourselves space to recognize that like some days are going to be harder than others. I wasn't with the OEC when HB6 was passed. I just joined in January, but all of my colleagues still talk about like how intense that time was and still is because we're still dealing with the implications of that. So it's important that we just give ourselves the space to understand the toughness of all of this, and have that be partially like our fuel to getting this work done and expanding it and growing it. And then a quote that I really like, circling back to that, is do what you can, do all you can where you're at right now and wherever else you might end up. And it's by an author, Marquise Bay. And I think like that quote to me is like something I hold on to as a personal mantra in terms of keeping this work sustainable. Because if you can just find something that you like to do, something that's important to you, and just doing whatever you can when you can, that can look in so many different ways over time, and it can really inspire others to do the same. So I think that those all together really like help facilitate the sustainability of like this really important work.
And so, can y'all hear me? Okay, sorry, my screen just did something crazy. So Dion kind of touched on my 2 questions from now in my head, but but I love that because I think like one thing that came up for me is, and you all talked about it, Ohio is a hard place to do work. We know we have issues with our maps right now. We know our education system was founded unconstitutional before I was a child, and I'm in my 30s. We now have learned today, for those of us that didn't know, that our energy bill is unconstitutional, is under investigation. And so with all of these piling issues, right, and all of this corruption, there's not a different word for it. Kind of how do we, like 2 things. One, how do we help people see how urgent it is to focus on the EJ work? And then how do we keep hope alive? Because in a place like this, where it seems like things aren't getting changed quickly enough, how do we keep hope alive that change will actually come?
Yeah, I can start. I think that's a really good question. So I think what is happening, and this has happened in so many different ways, and especially with the pandemic, and is that certain issues become political and partisan. And I think what's important to remember, like today speaking about energy, is this is not saving money for a household, not a partisan issue. Everyone across the spectrum wants to save money on their energy bills, right? And I think sometimes I'm not in the political sphere, so someone could probably talk more to this, but sometimes what's hard in my job is something that I think is not a political issue. I'm like, this is very straightforward. Everyone should be in favor of this. It like becomes that. And I think what is sad is I don't think it's at fault of the people necessarily. I think there's people in power that take advantage of things that make people anxious or nervous to convince them that they should be against it. And so what I think is a really amazing thing that I see a lot in the city of Dayton is, while we are more of a progressive city, we definitely have neighborhoods that are more lean different ways politically, right? And what I find so intriguing about my work is like when I'm talking to people, so for example, I'm working on an old landfill site. It was heavily polluted. It's considered an EPA Superfund site, which essentially means that it has a special designation because it was so toxic for both human health and the environment. And we have a very politically diverse perspective in that neighborhood. So people are on both sides of the spectrum, but everyone agrees unanimously that solar energy would be great on the site, because if we can put solar on the site, we can connect it to households and save them money. And what I found so interesting is like everyone was on board with that. It was no one had issues with it. But the second that becomes a political issue, so that renewable energy has become a political issue, like people are now like taking a stance on it, right? And at the end of the day, like renewable energy, like it's energy independence. That's like a very Republican talking point, but it's like true. Like if you get solar in your house, you're off the grid, you're making energy yourself. But at the same time, you can be saving money. And so trying to navigate the field to not make it so one or the other, I think has been something that is important, because the residents in the city of Dayton, they don't look at all these issues politically, but like on the statewide level and on a federal level, we almost echo it to make it like a political place. But if you're talking to people, they're saving money, or if it's good for their house, they don't care. And so trying to center on that again has, I think, been really important. And then speaking to your second point on hope, I think that like a lot of people don't, like I said, the first thing I said was energy is very complicated, right? And it only benefits few. And so I think sometimes people get scared about engaging with it because they're like, I don't know, it seems complicated, so I don't want to touch on this. And so my work can sometimes seem hopeless because I'm like, no one cares. But in reality, a lot of people probably care if they just knew, right? And like, if they knew that this was affecting them the way that it is without someone politicizing it. So I think an interesting part about my job is like, I'm trying to do what's best for the people, regardless of where they end up. And when I can get that message out and get more people excited about it too, I think that helps give me hope and continue it on. And I think it also excites other people. I've been told I'm a very excited, like I get very passionate and excited, which I think helps with like when I'm coming across to people. But I think like I tell them, I'm like, you can feel that way too, because this is impacting you and like you should care about this. And when people hear that, they're like, yeah, I do. They just need some time to like learn and hear it from somebody that they trust, which is also very important. Because sometimes as a government entity, we're not always, the most trusted. And like I said, we have historically done some very bad things in the city, like redlining. And so that's understandable too, is getting leaders that people can trust and to hear this message from too.
Urgency and hope.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to comment?
Meg did such a good job that I'm not even sure what I'm going to add to that.
Well, she said she's passionate.
I guess the one thing I'll add, Alex, if you don't have anything, really just echoing a lot of what Meg said, finding that common ground and helping. To me, it's like, how can we make people see what's happening like in their neighborhoods and like give them inspiration that you have the power to do something about this. It's really easy. And I understand becoming disengaged or apathetic towards all of this because of the way that things are. The culture around energy policy and environmental work overall, and the ways that a lot of groups have been intentionally under-resourced or neglected from the movement. And I think like helping people understand their individual power is really huge in terms of like hope and also urgency, honestly. And like I tied in with my last answer, like just thinking like really big, thinking big, forward looking. I'm someone who's like, I'm trying to think like towards the future, the decisions I make now are like, so that I can live in the future that I want me and my future family to live in. And that can feel so distant, but really whatever we can do in the present to help cultivate that goes such a huge way, because we don't want to look back 20, 30 years from now and think, what could we have been doing in that moment to be in a better spot now? One way I get to work on like more forward-looking things here in Ohio is through the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. And that is a clean energy policy that is centered on clean jobs, equity, and really facilitating transparency and accountability in a post-HB6 world here in Ohio, and really pushing our state agencies to be more transparent with our people, and breaking down this process more, because one can argue that some things are just made intentionally misleading and tough to understand, especially when it pertains to energy. And so in pushing for that accountability, and also carbon reductions in it, but also like what makes the Energy Jobs and Justice Act like more forward looking is that it really does think about like those equitable aspects that really often get overlooked in the energy field, and addresses like lasting harms that have been made against Ohio communities and helps facilitate like a more just transition to clean energy. And so, and just thinking of like things that sound like they could never exist here in Ohio, like why not? Like let's make something like the Energy Jobs and Justice Act like happen, because it is possible and we need it, our people need it. And the urgency, it's real. And I think like, echoing what Meg said, like finding that common ground across the board is really important to facilitating that.
The thing I'll kind of jump on and add is I think that it's important when you're talking to people to find the motivation that works for them. Maybe just some people it's just that we need to take care of the planet and that's enough. But for other people, they don't see that or they don't believe that. And so finding that that monetary hook and saying, well, if you do this, then all of your constituents will save money, or you'll save money, or, you know, finding that way to meet people on their level can be so important in having these conversations, because not every person you're going to talk to is going to think all the same things that you do. But you can make it more real to them if you kind of find a way to meet them where they are and to say, okay, well, what about this? Did you think about this? And, you know, have you considered how it impacts that? So I think that kind of some of that creativity that we talked about earlier can be so important in this. Just being creative in your arguments and in your ways that you frame things and what you bring to the table can really make a huge difference, because as all of the panelists have said, you know, not everything is a partisan issue, and not everyone in one party is the same as everyone in that same party. So finding people who have common ground on things is really, I think, how you make an impact and how you kind of keep the hope that things are going to change going.
So this is a funny question, basically, you know, to kind of lighten the mood. We all get emails, text messages, phone calls, and door knocking, right, from energy providers every week. I mean, they are out on Sunday when we are all trying to chill out, right? How real is that? You know, is that a part of the policy? Should we take advantage? Like, tell me, I mean, this is something that touches folks every day because they won't leave us alone. So please answer that question.
I'm sorry, I'm going to take this, everyone, because you just set me up to talk about my electric aggregation program. So I've been saying electric aggregation. A lot of people might be on this webinar like, I have no idea what that is. But I said we're saving each resident $350. So now I can explain how. Really quickly, not to put like my educator hat on, but in the state of Ohio, we are in a deregulated market, which means we can decide where our energy supply comes from, which is great, because when we're talking about climate equity, climate justice, that means we can choose it from fossil fuel-based resources or renewable resources. And the thing to remember is that your utility, so in this territory where we are in Dayton, Ohio, it's AES Ohio, will always be our deliverer of the energy. But where the energy comes from, that generation, we can actually choose. So the people knocking on your door are those suppliers, but they are the people that go out to the generators, they buy energy, and then they want to sell it to you. However, in the city of Dayton, we have what we call an electric aggregation program. So me, as the energy person at the city, I go out on behalf of residents and I choose their energy for them. So I select the generator, and I selected at a certain price to hopefully give them a savings on their energy bill. Because if I'm not doing that electric aggregation program, you as a resident, you can either select your supplier yourself, or AES Ohio just has like a default rate. So this year, energy prices are crazy. And another thing I was going to add in to the question before this is, in our brains, we want everything to be so simple, and unfortunately they're not. So energy prices are rising for a variety of issues. The war going on in Ukraine, supply chain issues, Europe needing gas from us, et cetera, et cetera. So AES's rate went from 4.8 cents per kilowatt hour, which everyone was the default paying in the city of Dayton, to 10.9 cents. That's almost a triple increase. So the city of Dayton was like, we are going to start our electric aggregation program. And across the board, our residents had voted. So you have to vote to start electric aggregation. So they voted for it. And they were like, we want renewable energy. So we went out and we supplied, our generation is 100% renewable energy. And we bought it the day before Russia invaded Ukraine. So we bought it at a cheaper rate than when AES bought it. So our rate that we're paying is still more expensive than last year because energy rates are going up. But everyone in the city of Dayton is now only paying 7.4 cents instead of 10.9. So if we didn't start a program, you know, you would be paying the 10.9, but now you're only paying 7.4. So that's the savings. That's the $350-ish that everyone's going to see on their bills. So when someone's knocking on your door, they're trying to take you off my program and they're trying to put you on their program. So say no. And if you don't have an aggregation program, so those who might be listening that aren't in city limits, like the city of Kettering does not have one, the city of Centerville does not have one, Trotwood does not have one. You know, sometimes those suppliers can get you a better deal, but there's a lot of things you have to consider. And a lot of times they're only locking you in for 3 months, and then they might raise your rates. They might have a cancellation fee. There's a lot of things to think about. So my biggest recommendation is, if you're watching this, if someone knocks on your door and asks you for energy, I would recommend saying no. And then I'd also recommend contacting your city government. So for me at the City of Dayton, I help people try and find the best deals possible. So I will explain kind of what's happening. Same with all the other cities around us. They have people that can kind of help walk you through that. But yes, so that's what those people are doing. But thank you for that question, because that was able, so now I can highlight our city program. And yeah, that's a great, aggregation is great, because now all of our residents are 100% renewable energy. So we procured it from a renewable resource, which is further incentivizing renewable energy in the US, which is awesome.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question then, because I just knew you all had the answer.
I was waiting. I was waiting for it. Aggregation is confusing like everything else. And so I didn't want to like just jump into that in the beginning. So yeah.
Well, no, thank you. And I just bought a home, so I'm going to be leaving Dayton. So now I'm like freaking out, like, I need to call my city
yes.
and figure out what to
I'll
do.
help you out. My number is 937-333-3623. Webinar, folks. You can call the City of Dayton. That's my work number. And I will help you figure it out.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I know that today we talked about things that were hard, but is there one thing that you all would suggest to the people that we do today after we leave the webinar? What's one thing that we can do that will help with the EJ movement and improving the policy?
I can go first. So I would say it's to stay as involved as you can. You know, I was sensitive to what Meg said earlier about how, you know, we're all busy. People don't have time to be spending hours and hours of their day being, you know, researching and trying to be involved in all of these things. But if there's one resource you can follow or one organization that you can get on their newsletter, so you know when these sorts of things are happening and when you can lend your voice to it, just do something to be proactive about staying involved and getting the information. And I think it'll make a big difference in how involved you feel in decisions going forward.
Someone said yesterday, I was going to say, Deanna, at the conference that we were at, that like democracy takes work. And it's not a passive process, it's an active process. And I think that's so true. So yeah, I was going to say, Alex, I'm just echoing what you said again about being engaged. I think it's important. We live in a society that's intentionally sowing mistrust into everything. And that is not what community is. Community is not based on mistrust. And the only way that we have good community engagement and that we can work together is if we trust each other. Now, I'm not saying just like all of a sudden start trusting everyone, but build those relationships with people. So if you're a resident listening to this and you're like, I don't trust the government, like that's, you know, there's been harms in the past and that makes it understandable. But like we have people in the City of Dayton, community engagement officers that are just there to like have good relationship with you and listen to your needs. And I think that is super important. Is we're only going to make movement in the climate world and to have good policy that reflects the needs of our residents if we all start coming together, trusting each other, building strong support system to then move forward. So yeah, I forget who told me that the other day, but they told me, they're like, the fact that people are intentionally sowing mistrust into all of these different things, whether it's government, nonprofits, your neighbor next door, whatever, is like intentionally dividing us. Again, so only a few people can come out victorious, the people that are intentionally sowing that mistrust. So really rely on the people that you love, the people that you care about, get together, talk about these issues, form connections with nonprofits or people within your community that are working on this. And that is a way, if you don't have time, that is, if you can form that circle of people that you trust, collectively together, you can advocate, right? And so that's very important.
Oof, these are such hard answers to follow. I love both of them so much, between like just staying engaged generally and then finding those people and connecting with those you still care about. I'll just echo both of those and offer one example of one way to do that here in Ohio is through supporting the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, because it's a statewide policy that could really change this culture around energy here in Ohio. And it calls for 100% carbon-free Ohio by 2050. And so you could tell your legislators to support that, or just sign up for our emails to know what's happening in that way. And I think similarly, just continuing to have conversations like these and participate in conversations like these and finding ways to learn together and share skills with one another. I believe, I forget who said it earlier in this call, but someone brought up just like understanding what we individually bring to these different spaces. And I feel like we just have so much to learn from one another, from our different backgrounds. Like Meg, that was an incredible Aggregation 101, like the quickest and most amazing thing ever, and I could not do that in that way. But like, you know, you have that amazing background, and Alex, you have your amazing background as well. And so just understanding like what you have to offer and what you care about, I think like as like a more general thing, I think is huge. Just really finding like what you're passionate about when it pertains to this work, and letting that just like push you along and build and grow in different ways that like haven't been seen before. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So for the Energy Justice and Jobs, is that the correct title? Act. Just for clarity, that is a federal act, or is it a state? It's a state act, and it will help come against the corruption of the H6 movement. Okay, is there other things that we need to know about that, since we have a few more minutes, that you all could tell us?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. So it is a statewide policy, and it was just introduced in the Ohio House this past September. And it has its three main pillars, kind of like I've spoken to, our equity, really honing in on those carbon reductions statewide, because a lot of different cities right now have really great climate action plans and are really leading the way here in Ohio. And so the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, you may hear me say EJA for short, or EJJA, does a really good job of like putting the state back and having some goals in terms of reducing our emissions, because Ohio has a really high amount of carbon emissions that are really fueling climate change. And the EJA does this in a way that really institutionalizes like justice and equity in a way that we haven't seen before here in Ohio. It would create like a governor's office of energy justice that would be exist specifically to carry out principles of energy justice across the state and holding like different agencies accountable. I think a lot of the times in policies, like we can have really great ideas that just get like lost in implementation, right? And so having an agency specifically for that will be huge. It would create 15 clean energy hubs across the state. So in all different types of communities, not just in like our big 3 Cs. And those clean energy hubs would be specifically focused on directing resources to Black, Indigenous, and communities of color through different job training programs and workforce development resource support. So for example, it includes like the Ohio Jumpstart training program, which specifically supports formerly incarcerated Ohioans who are re-entering the workforce and like helping them have jobs to enter into this clean energy economy. Because clean energy economy is just growing so rapidly right now, and like we need to have things in place to help more communities that have been historically left out to be able to engage in this just transition and not be left out in the future. And so these clean energy hubs, you know, they support with transportation, they support with childcare, like really breaking down those barriers that like have prevented people from being able to engage in this work like before. And it would be all across the state, like I mentioned. And then the accountability and transparency aspect too really speaks directly to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, and helping them give us more fair rates, holding them to equity and energy justice principles. And it also would call for supporting grid modernization, which we know that we need after what's happened here across Ohio the past couple of days. It's a really big bill and just like a forward-looking thing that, a forward-looking solution that tries to encompass all of the different, like it speaks directly to the regressive energy landscape we have here in Ohio, and doing so in a way that brings all Ohioans on board and like doesn't leave anyone behind as we transition. It also creates a fund, for instance, for communities that have been previously reliant on fossil fuels, because you know those different oil and gas companies can have a really huge presence in like Appalachian Ohio or just different communities and be a huge source of jobs for folks. And so when they leave, people are kind of like, what am I supposed to do? Right, like I need to work, I need money. And so EJA would specifically direct funds to those communities so that they can help and to help these communities in this transition so that they're not left behind.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's just like a little bit about EJA. Like I said, it's a really big, I'll drop some links in the chats if you want to learn more.
Yes, please.
But yeah, that's like the big high level overview of it all. I hope that makes sense.
And I want to add on, Dion, because the only thing I think we haven't talked about, so House Bill 6, like we said, it was a bill, but it became law. This is coming out of that, trying to correct, because what is so important that everyone needs to understand about House Bill 6 is it never fully got repealed. So we are still bailing out nuclear and coal plants. We are still paying money on our utility bills that are going directly to corporations. So if people are frustrated that their bills are going up, part of the reason your utility bill is going up is because of this correct House Bill 6 that has not been repealed yet. I think there's been parts, correct me if I'm wrong, parts that have been repealed, but not the whole thing. And so everybody across the residents, across political parties wants to save money on their utility bills. A great way would be to fully repeal House Bill 6 so that we wouldn't have to deal with all of these increase on our bills due to the corruption that happened.
Thank you so much for uplifting that, Meg. Yeah, it has not been fully repealed and we're still paying for it for coal plants that are in Indiana, bringing, you know, dirty energy to Ohio. So next month is actually the anniversary of that being passed. So please plug in with like all different environmental groups. I'm sure we'll be speaking to it because it's, you know, we're still dealing with the repercussions of it. So.
Wow, what a call to action. Thank you all so much for sharing. This has been an amazing week. We have learned the definitions. We have learned how to get involved in the grassroots. And now we have learned how we got to change this policy so that we can get our state on track to doing the right thing. So thank you all so much for coming out, speaking, sharing with us, sharing these resources. And I'm going to pass the mic to Donna because we know she's going to close us out with the bang.
Oh, this week, to Charmaine's point, has been so full, and each session has built upon educating community on environmental justice and how it is social justice. So we thank you, panelists, for a call to action. We love a good call to action. Tell us what we need to do and we will do it. So please stay connected to YWCA Dayton so that we can lift up the causes on our platforms as well. So we want to thank Ohio Climate Justice Fund for the opportunity to facilitate these conversations. And we thank you, panelists, for the gracious gift of your time and knowledge. And we thank those who have joined us today. If you're interested in learning more about what's happening at YWCA Dayton, what we're hosting, conversations like this, please connect with us on ywcadayton.org/volunteers, ywcadayton.org/events, ywcadayton.org/help, or just follow us on social media on any of.
Oh, shoot.
I think she had a little disconnection, but follow the YWCA on social media at YWCA Dayton. And you can get all the good news of all the work that the YW is doing as far as eliminating racism and empowering women. Bless you all for spending the week with us. And I look forward to a cleaner earth, a cleaner Ohio, a stronger Ohio, and a more moral Ohio by working with you all. So y'all, happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Juneteenth. Okay, celebrating freedom. And let's free our earth right along with us. So yes, bye.
See you later.
Yeah, bye.